My God, why have you forsaken me?" Think about, the sheer agonizing weight of those
Yeah,
words.
it is incredibly heavy.
Right. And in a text packed to the brim with mocking soldiers and scheming religious leaders and political operators just desperately trying to cover their own bases, the central irony of today's deep dive is incredibly sharp.
Oh, absolutely.
Because let me give you a preview of where this is all heading. By the time we reach the end of this narrative, the only completely accurate statement about who Jesus is, it comes as a sarcastic joke scrawled on a Roman execution sign.
Right.
And the only person who finally understands his true identity isn't a loyal follower, or a brilliant scholar. It is the enemy executioner himself.
It's a profound subversion, really. I mean, if you are reading closely, everything you think you know about how power, authority, and truth operate just gets systematically dismantled in this text.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for this deep dive into Mark chapter 15 is to pull back the layers on that dismantling. We are looking at, a powder keg of overlapping authorities, crowd manipulation, and the cold machinery of imperial brutality surrounding the trial and execution of Jesus.
Yeah, and the whole situation kicks off at first light with this massive, tense political standoff.
Exactly. You have the Sanhedrin, which the text tells us comprises the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes, making up the whole council, and they bind Jesus, lead him away, and hand him over to Pontius Pilate.
Right, the Roman prefect serving under Emperor Tiberius.
Yeah. So let's break down the mechanics of this morning handoff. Why are the religious leaders hauling a prisoner to a Roman prefect right at dawn?
Well, it comes down to a massive legal and structural imbalance.
Hmm.
Yeah, the Sanhedrin had immense religious clout and local influence over the populace, but legally, their hands were tied by the occupation.
Meaning they couldn't execute anyone?
Exactly. They had absolutely no authority to carry out a capital execution themselves. That power of life and death was a monopoly held strictly by Rome, and by extension, by Pilate, who served as prefect of Judea from roughly 26 to 36 CE.
Got it.
And crucifixion was a uniquely Roman punishment. I mean, it was a tool of state terror reserved for slaves and enemies of the empire, and it was never deployed without official sanction.
Right, so the Sanhedrin has a captive they want eliminated, but they literally need the Roman military machine to actually carry out the sentence.
Right.
So Pilate starts questioning him directly. He asks Jesus point blank, "Are you the king of the Jews?" But Jesus gives back almost nothing.
Yeah, he just answers, "You have said so," and then stops engaging entirely.
Right, to the point that the text says Pilate is amazed, and I am trying to picture the dynamic here. It feels less like a straightforward trial and, I don't know, more like a bureaucratic proxy war.
A proxy war is a much better way to frame it, actually.
Yeah.
How do you see that playing out?
Well, imagine you're working in a massive corporation, right? And you want a rival fired, but you don't actually have the managerial authority to fire them.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of doing it yourself, you orchestrate this massive PR nightmare. You whip up a frenzy of complaints, and you basically drop the entire mess on the CEO's desk at 6 in the morning.
Right, you force their hand.
Exactly. You back the CEO into a corner where they feel like they have to sign off on the termination just to keep the peace. The Sanhedrin is essentially like laundering an execution through Rome to avoid getting their own hands dirty.
That captures the manipulation perfectly. And what is vital to notice in Mark's account is that Pilate is not oblivious to this strategy at all.
He knows what they are doing.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at Mark 15.10, the text gives us a direct window into Pilate's psychology. It explicitly states that Pilate perceived that the chief priests had delivered Jesus up out of envy.
Envy, wow.
Yeah, Pilate knows this isn't about a genuine seditious threat to the Roman Empire. He sees right through the local political theater.
Well, that raises a huge question for me. Because historical sources paint Pilate as a stubborn, sometimes incredibly brutal governor. He is not some squeamish middle management bureaucrat.
No, definitely not.
So if he knows he is being played by the chief priests out of pure envy, why doesn't he just tell them to get lost? Pilate tries to use a loophole to release Jesus, but the crowd demands a man who represents the exact thing the Roman Empire fears most. So who do they choose, and what does it reveal about the powder keg of Jerusalem?
Well, to understand why a brutal Roman governor suddenly folds, we really have to talk about the Passover prisoner release custom. The crowd, spurred on by the chief priests, demands the release of a man named Barabbas.
Right.
And Barabbas is not a pickpocket. The text tells us he was bound with those who had committed murder in an armed insurrection. Now, what is fascinating here is that Some scholars believe this specific Passover prisoner release custom, which isn't confirmed in Roman law outside the Gospels, was actually a local accommodation specifically designed to ease extreme tensions during the festival.
Wait, I need to stop you there because the logic feels entirely backward to me.
How so?
Well, Barabbas represents the literal worst-case scenario for an occupying force. I mean, an actual violent insurrectionist. Why on earth would Rome let a guy who kills Romans walk free just to appease a crowd?
Because you have to visualize the sheer scale of the political math Pilate is doing in his head right now. Put yourself in his shoes for a moment. This is the Passover festival.
Right.
Jerusalem's population didn't just increase, it exploded. You have tens of thousands of pilgrims packed into these narrow streets. The air is thick with smoke from sacrifices. Religious fervor is at an absolute boiling point.
And the historical memory of liberation from slavery in Egypt is on everyone's mind.
Exactly. Roman authorities were acutely terrified of crowd dynamics during Passover. Pilate's entire career, and honestly likely his life, under Emperor Tiberius depends on one single thing.
Yeah.
Keeping the province quiet.
And the chief priests understand this leverage perfectly.
They really do. They stir up the crowd to scream for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be crucified. If Pilate denies the mob and a massive riot erupts, Tiberius will hold him responsible.
So the threat of thousands of rioting pilgrims is a heavier weight than the life of one Galilean teacher.
Right. The pressure breaks him.
He sacrifices justice for crowd control. It is chilling when you lay it out like that. And the moment he caves, the cold, mechanical reality of the Roman Empire just activates.
Yeah, they move fast.
Pilate hands Jesus over to be scourged and crucified, and the soldiers lead him away into the courtyard of the palace, which is the Praetorium. Now, for those trying to mentally map this out, some scholars believe the Praetorium was either Herod the Great's former luxurious palace on the western side of the city, or the Antonia Fortress, which loomed right over the Temple Mount.
Yeah, and while scholars still debate the exact stone courtyard, what happens inside is completely unambiguous.
Right. The soldiers called together the whole battalion. They dress Jesus in a purple cloak, twist together a crown of thorns, and put it on him. They strike his head with a reed, spit on him, and drop to their knees in mock homage, saluting him as "Hail, King of the Jews." Yeah. I mean, it is a deeply disturbing scene of collective violence.
It is incredibly disturbing.
Oh, yeah.
But we have to look past the surface cruelty to understand the mechanics of what the soldiers are actually doing here. This is not just a bunch of bored soldiers acting out randomly.
Yeah.
No, this is highly calculated, practiced counterinsurgency theater.
Counterinsurgency theater? What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the symbolic power of a king. If someone claims royal authority, they become a beacon for rebellion.
Right.
Rome understood that you cannot just kill a rebel. You have to kill the mythology surrounding them.
Right.
Dressing a condemned, beaten man in the purple of royalty, giving him a crown made of thorns, and staging a fake coronation, it is a deliberate ritual of humiliation.
So they are trying to completely drain the dignity and the symbolic threat out of any claim to the throne.
Exactly. They are turning the very idea of resistance against Rome into a pathetic, bloody punchline, so that no one watching this spectacle would ever dare to follow in his footsteps.
So they are physically stripping him of his dignity in the Praetorium, but they need to make sure the public actually gets the joke. How do they communicate that to the thousands of pilgrims crowding the city?
Well, they don't just keep him in the courtyard.
Right. The text says they strip off the purple cloak, put his own clothes back on him, and lead him out to crucify him.
Oh.
Along the way, they compel a passerby, a man named Simon of Cyrene, who is just coming in from the country, to carry his cross.
Which shows you the physical exhaustion is already so severe that the Roman machine has to conscript civilian labor just to get the condemned man to the execution site.
Yeah. They bring him to a place called Golgotha, which translates to place of a skull. And this location is crucial. It is outside the city walls.
Right. The geography is no accident. Roman law and custom heavily favored public executions along major arterial roads. This wasn't hidden away in a dark dungeon somewhere. Crucifixion was the billboard of the ancient world. It was specifically staged where the maximum number of travelers, merchants, and pilgrims would be forced to look at it.
It served as a visceral, inescapable public deterrent.
Exactly. They crucify him at the third hour, which is 9 in the morning, flanked by 2 criminals, forcing the massive Passover crowds to witness the cost of defying Rome.
Which brings us to the most fascinating detail of that public display, the charge nailed above him. Mark 15.26 says, and the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews."
Yes.
And here is where it gets really interesting, because this is where all these competing agendas violently collide. Rome posts this sign as an official criminal accusation.
Right. For Pilate and the soldiers, it is a sarcastic warning to the occupied province.
Yeah.
Like, look at what happens to your so-called kings.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the chief priests look at that exact same sign and use it as vindication, proof that he was a blasphemer who deserved to die. Everyone is using this title for their own distinct political or religious narrative.
They are. But if we step back and look at the architecture of Mark's entire narrative, something brilliant and deeply ironic is happening.
What is that?
By the internal logic of the text, that sign, the King of the Jews, is the only completely accurate sentence uttered by anyone in authority in this entire chapter.
Oh, wow.
It is the ultimate narrative flip. The title is meant to humiliate him and publicly advertise his absolute defeat. Yet it inadvertently proclaims exactly what the gospel has been arguing from page 1.
Right. Every single character who walks by shaking their head, from the chief priests mocking him to the soldiers gambling for his garments, they all think they are witnessing the end of a fraud.
Exactly. And without realizing it, their mockery is the very thing announcing his identity to the world.
It is like they are all aggressively delivering lines in a play without having any idea what the script actually means. The irony is incredibly heavy.
It really is.
And as the narrative progresses, the physical atmosphere actually begins to reflect that heaviness. At the 6th hour, which is noon, the text says darkness falls over the whole land until the 9th hour, which is 3 in the afternoon.
Right, this eerie, oppressive midday blackout.
Yeah. And out of that darkness, at the 9th hour, Jesus cries out in a loud voice. He speaks in Aramaic, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which translates to, my God, why have you forsaken me?
And we really cannot overstate the profound weight of that cry. He is quoting the opening line of Psalm 22 verbatim.
Right.
By invoking that specific scripture, the narrative basically collapses the distance between ancient, formalized lamentation poetry and the raw, excruciating reality of a Roman execution.
Yeah.
It isn't a polite theological statement. It is a raw outburst of total abandonment.
Yeah. And immediately following that cry, Jesus utters another loud cry and breathes his last. Then something highly symbolic occurs. The curtain of the temple is torn in two from top to bottom.
That detail is so crucial.
I really want to dig into that, actually, because if you are just reading casually, a torn curtain sounds like a minor architectural detail compared to a crucifixion. But why does the tearing of this specific curtain matter so much to the narrative?
Well, curtain in the temple wasn't just a decorative drape. It was the massive physical barrier separating the Holy of Holies, the dwelling place of God's presence, from the rest of the temple, and by extension from the general public.
So it represented the ultimate boundary between the divine and humanity.
Exactly. And notice the direction. It tears from top to bottom, implying a divine action rather than human hands. This signals two massive shifts.
Okay.
First, the barrier separating humanity from God has been destroyed. And second, it serves as a divine judgment on the very temple establishment, the chief priests and the Sanhedrin, who orchestrated this execution in the first place.
Oh, wow.
Their central symbol of exclusive religious authority is physically ripped apart the exact moment he dies.
That dramatically shifts how I view the climax of this entire scene. So, okay, the temple system is symbolically tearing apart, the disciples have completely vanished from the narrative, and the religious leaders are busy mocking him. So who is left to actually comprehend what just happened?
This is where we meet the Roman centurion.
Right, the soldier of the occupying army, the literal manager of the execution detail standing directly opposite the cross. He watches how Jesus breathes his last.
And his reaction provides the defining revelation of the chapter. Look closely at Mark 15.39.
Okay.
The centurion, seeing how he died, says, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." We have to pause and let the magnitude of that sink in.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the very first human being in Mark's entire gospel to plainly, accurately declare Jesus as the Son of God is not Peter. It is not one of the scribes who memorized the prophets.
It is the enemy executioner.
Exactly. A man whose entire career and worldview are built on the brutal supremacy of the Roman Empire.
The ultimate subversion. I mean, the people who had every advantage, who had the scriptures and the years of following him, they scattered when the pressure hit.
Yeah, they did.
But the man holding the literal execution orders, staring at a broken, crucified victim, is the one who sees the truth clearly. It just leaves you stunned.
Yeah, it really does.
And surprisingly, the political fallout doesn't end when the crowd disperses. As evening approaches, because it is the day of preparation before the Sabbath, a new figure steps into the frame. Joseph of Arimathea.
Right.
The text describes him as a respected member of the council. He is part of the very same establishment, the Sanhedrin, that just voted to condemn Jesus at dawn. Yet he takes a massive, calculated risk. He gathers his courage, goes directly to Pontius Pilate, and asks for the body of Jesus.
And think about the intense hostility Joseph is inviting upon himself by doing that.
Right, he is a prominent council member, breaking ranks in the most public way possible.
Exactly. By claiming the body of a state-executed criminal, he is associating himself with treason in the eyes of Rome and with blasphemy in the eyes of his colleagues.
But Pilate, after verifying with the centurion that Jesus is actually dead, he grants the body. So Joseph buys a linen shroud, takes him down, wraps him, and lays him in a tomb that had been cut out of the rock. He then rolls a heavy stone against the entrance of the tomb.
Which is such a striking image to end on.
It feels incredibly final. A rock-cut tomb sealed shut. It forces you to evaluate everything we have just discussed. The entire system failed. The disciples fled in fear. The religious leaders weaponized their influence for a political assassination.
And the Roman governor compromised his own legal authority to appease a mob.
Right, the institutions completely crumbled, and yet the only people who act with any clarity or courage at the very end are an enemy executioner and a rogue council member risking his entire reputation. It really challenges you to think about where loyalty actually lies when the establishment collapses.
It definitely does.
Well, I want to turn this over to you, the listener. Imagine standing in that Passover crowd, watching this intricate web of political manipulation play out. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts on the historical drama we explored today. What stood out to you the most? Was it Pilates' desperate crowd control, the layers of irony on the Roman sign, or the centurion's shocking realization? Let us know in the comments.
We love reading those.
We really do. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the mechanisms of history and narrative, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the show. It really helps us bring you more of these thorough explorations. Also, be sure to check the description below. We have provided exclusive links to our source texts, some fascinating historical maps of first-century Jerusalem, and further reading on Roman provincial law.
There are always deeper layers to uncover when you look closely at the text.
There always are. And speaking of uncovering, we are leaving off at a literal sealed door. Joseph of Arimathea has rolled a massive stone against the entrance of the rock-cut tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Josephus, are watching, seeing exactly where he was laid.
But the story doesn't stay buried in the dark.
No, it doesn't. So what actually happens in the next chapter? What will the women discover when they arrive at the tomb just after sunrise, find that incredibly heavy stone already rolled away, and step inside to encounter a young man in a white robe with a deeply shocking message? You will not want to miss that.